everyone. Tony Tonkin here from Wise, Witty and Weird. Glad that you could be with me today for another thrilling and exciting version of this channel. Now, today though, I wanted to talk, oh my God, I'm doing it again. I'm talking about Sky News. It is interesting though that Alan Jones, poor bastard, is unwell, had to have an operation. I guess it was a neurological operation, but regretfully it wasn't, I guess, because it was more of a physical thing, I think. Look, I don't wish anybody harm or anybody to be unwell, and I certainly hope that Alan recovers from whatever it is that plagues him, apart from stupidity. But he's got this woman now on his show, whose name I keep forgetting, but because she's probably pretty insignificant, and she's talking. She talked the last couple of days about the way Australia is being perceived overseas. Now, the only people that she's quoting at the moment, it seems to be Tucker Carlson. And who can give a rat's ass what Tucker thinks of us? Because I don't. And I don't think many other people do. And, you know, many people in the United States wouldn't even know where Australia was in the first place. So I don't think it's a big deal. But I'm intrigued by the contradiction that sits with people like Sky and the right-wing media when they're trying to highlight the faults of other nations. And look, we have our own faults. I understand all of that. We haven't probably handled the coronavirus as best as we could. However, there were praises galore for us at the beginning of the virus last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, last year, when we were able to we were able to keep the bloody virus out to start with, and we had very few cases, and that particular strain wasn't as infectious, obviously, as the Delta strain. But we have been very, very successful at what we've done. Now, we were pretty slow, because of all of that, I guess we're pretty slow in getting the vaccine and rolling out the vaccine as quickly as we could have. We just were not good at it. We didn't do. Morrison's responsible for that, and the man will probably pay a price for that at the next election. But this idea that somehow we're a terrible place because on two occasions we had protesters protesting about their lack of freedom and the fact that there's lockdowns in Victoria and New South Wales, which are the majority. So the majority of the population live within those two states. It just bemuses me because, you know, when the world looked at, so somehow the United States is held up by what Ronald Reagan called the shining light on the hill. Well, frankly, their light's not shining too bright anymore, not because of Biden, because of the jerk that they had there before him. And of course, things aren't going that well in Afghanistan, understand all of that. But in terms of a nation, a country, there is no doubt that that the American citizens, not all, but have a lunatic fringe that leaves our lunatic fringe for dead. Now, we have one, but we're nowhere near as toxic, I think, at this stage. It could get there, though, because there are still some crazy people in this country. It could get there, but it hasn't just yet. But the important thing is that the way we're portrayed, or the way Sky News want to portray us, is a betrayal, actually, of who we actually are. And they want to focus on the fact that the United States is fabulous. The letdown for Sky News is that Trump didn't get in, Biden did. But apart from that, you know, the United States is the greatest country on this planet. It isn't, far from it, in my opinion, but certainly, and I don't say we are either. I don't know who is, and I don't care. All I want to do is be safe in my own country and not worry too much about others. I'm concerned about Afghanistan. I'm concerned about immigrants. I'm concerned about children who find themselves in hostile environments or or starving or whatever. So I'm concerned about all of that. Of course I am. I'm concerned about climate change. But I think when it comes to comparing countries, forget it. But we do need to look back at the United States. And I have a clip here which reminds us, before I show you the clips from Sky News, this clip will remind us of what was happening in the United States on January the 6th.
Another thing I would say, Lester, is, as we try to figure out, well, it looks now like the Capitol, the police have been
Pete, let me break away from you a
back.
second, because things are happening very quickly.
The government did this to us. We were normal, good, law-abiding citizens.
They no longer have been able to keep them back.
Now, frankly, I think some of those images, and there are many of them in this particular clip from CNBC, that there's plenty about the United States that's terrible. We could have a look at the Black Lives Matter clips. We could have a look at a whole host of riots and other stuff that's been happening forever in the United States. They are a country in trouble, real trouble. And so Sky News will not replay any of those scenes where Trump inspired this insurrection. That somehow, it's almost like none of that happens. But when something happens in Australia, these bastards decide to take us down. Our own people choose to highlight our deficiencies in the light of a whole host of deficiencies by this other country. And there's just a clip here where she talks about the world's reactions to the latest lockdowns. So I'll just play some of this, and then we'll sort of comment on the other side.
Increasingly thinking Australia has lost the plot. And frankly, who can blame them with some of the most draconian restrictions anywhere in the world right now?
So who thinks we've lost the plot?
And police resorting to pointing guns with so-called pepper ball pellets at protesters in the streets of Melbourne. This isn't the Australia I know. What has happened to the lucky country? No wonder people overseas think we're barking mad. What else can you say about a country?
Who is it? I just don't know. Who is it overseas? She talks in a later clip that I'll show you about the United States, and she quotes, of all people, Tucker Carlson. Like, who gives a fuck? Anyway, but they receive a lot of news over there. Very rarely is Australian news even mentioned. As I said before, people don't even know where we live half the time, where the country is. So, but they do tend to focus a lot on us when something's going wrong. And, this is, as I said before, I'm not going to make comparisons, but we're a really good country. We're a democratic country. We don't often have the politicians that we need to have. We probably get the politicians we deserve, which means we're pretty stuffed, I guess. But we can go on the streets, we can advocate for change, we can do a whole host of things. It doesn't always work out for us, but at least we can have a voice. At this particular point, she's talking about this is not the country I knew. I don't know when Rita has actually ever been in a country where there's been a pandemic before. Maybe she has. I don't know where that would have been. Maybe she got caught up in South Africa during the polio scare some years ago. I don't know. Maybe she's been locked away in another country that we don't know about, which has had an outbreak of something like the coronavirus or some other form of infection. Don't know. I doubt it, but she makes it seem like this is the country I don't know. Well, what the hell is what is this? This is a new country in terms of discovering how to deal with something we haven't dealt with for over 100 years. This is new. Anyway, she goes on to say,
where dogs are shot dead in the name of COVID safety. Yes, as the Sydney Morning Herald reports, several impounded dogs due to be rescued by shelter have instead been shot dead.
Several. So we'd think it was
Berkshire
thousands the way she
Council
carries
killed
on.
the dogs to prevent volunteers at an animal shelter from travelling to pick up the animals. The rest of the world looks on with disbelief as we rationalise any manner of cruelty and craziness. Not letting loved ones visit their dying family members across borders, making people travel further for emergency hospital care so they don't cross a state border.
Can I just say that the issue around some people have been allowed to go and visit their loved ones. I think there was somebody from interstate who needed to come to South Australia to visit a dying father or something. And that was taken care of. That was agreed upon. You know, you can't just say, you know, people are prohibited from, you know, how many people are you talking about? There are some, I'm not disputing any of that. But when these bloody idiots from Sky or reporters generally refuse to identify the amounts and numbers that they're referring to, they're sowing misinformation. Because it's just whatever you think of is inaccurate. It is. You know, if they said there are 20 people that are trying to come and visit their relatives, whatever, and they've been told they can't, I get that. Appropriate figure can be checked out with the health department. Understand it. But they don't. They don't. Because they don't care about identifying the real reasons that people may or may not be able to see their relatives, you know. And the reality is, of course, if you have people coming into your state from a hotspot like Sydney, the chances are, and it's been proved over and over again, that virus enters into another state like South Australia, Tasmania, Western Australia, whatever, and then the virus spreads, and as we see in New South Wales, people die. You know? So it's like they're so thick, they don't understand the consequences of sometimes the terrible decisions to make. Someone makes them, they probably don't make them with a terrible amount of glee or joy. They just have to make them because they are facing the realities here. So she goes on to say,
I've been so used to this insanity. What seems mad to many around the world has been normalised here.
Who?
Like a state premier scolding their constituents for watching a sunset.
You know, there's a whole bunch of people down the Ryback Beach last night who thought the best thing to do was to go and watch.
Don't you love the way they try to simplify it? It wasn't about, you're a moron. It wasn't about the sunset. It was about people being outside when they shouldn't have been outside. Who gives a shit whether it's the sunset or a comet or, you know, some other lunar activity? Apart from a lunatic activity which you guys at Sky carry on with. Who cares? The reality is that people were outside when they weren't supposed to be outside. To make it about going out and staring at the stars is just not what it's about, you know?
Watch the sunset. I'm sure it was a beautiful sunset.
We have beautiful sunsets all the time.
That's not in the spirit or in the letter of these rules.
We even had Dan Andrews telling people not to enjoy yesterday's beautiful sunshine because you could end up in hospital.
Sunday, I think, is going to be quite a nice day. Yep, at
Anyway,
home.
I guess from all of this you get the gist of what she's saying. She's saying that you can't enjoy a sunset, you can't go outside. Therefore, you know, because we're deprived of some of these privileges that we've been accustomed to, then the system's stuffed, and Dan Andrews a monster and a dictator and all this other sort of crap. So this is where they're coming from with regard to this. But the classic of classics happens to be this other clip, which she must have been on a roll, because I don't know when she did this. She did this yesterday. When was the other one done? The other one's the day before. So this is the 24th I'm about to show you. So this is where the lockdown, and look who's sharing this lunacy. Like, I think Rita, you're as crazy as they come if you think that this stuff pays dues. But I guess it must, because, you know, otherwise the Murdoch media wouldn't be hiring you to spread this sort of crap. Let's see what she says, and let's watch the guy, the greatest jerk of all time, talk about Australia.
Some more footage from Australia that is going viral, painting our country as some dystopian nightmare where individual rights are not protected and a scared populace submits to a police state. They're not painting.
Individual rights are not protected. Now, this is an issue that really gripes me, because if my right says that I can go into the community during a pandemic and do whatever I want to do, and that may mean that I might become infected, I might pass that infection on to my wife, to my children, and that because I accept that that's my right, and that means then that one of them may have long-term COVID or even die from the disease, apart from just the experience and suffering through what this disease causes. So my right to be able to be free and do whatever I want to do means that then I may put other people at risk and some people may die. When you weigh it up, I think as a society we abdicate a lot of our rights in order to keep other people safe. The reason why we wear seatbelts, the reason why here in Australia we drive on the left-hand side of the road, the reason why we have stoplights, the reason why as kids we had measles vaccinations and polio vaccinations when I was young. The reasons why we had all of those things is to be able to keep society safe. The reasons why we have laws, why we have the police, why we have hospitals, all these things are why we are safe, why we're safe. And in a pandemic, all of those things come together to try and keep us safer. So if we were to do what a lot of these anti-vaxxers want us to do, it would breed chaos, absolute chaos. And that's not what this is about. But people like Rita and Sky want to convince other people, particularly people in the US, that we are a chaotic nation. That this is who it isn't who we are at this moment. We're just trying to do the best, and there are people pushing back against it. It's as simple as that. It's no different from those videos you saw in the rioters, thousands, hundreds of thousands of them in the US.
A very nice picture of Australia, I've got to say. Have a look.
There's little sympathy for
Otherwise,
anyone
just have a
ignoring
look.
health orders. Even this group of teenagers caught partying after dark at the bottom of the North Bondi Cliffs. Herded to higher ground by Polaire's spotlight and speaker, the 8 boys were placed in handcuffs and left to explain a $1,000 fine to mum.
681 penalty infringement notices issued in the last 24 hours. More than 400 of those notices were again for people being outside of their home without a reasonable...
So if you're going to have rules that say you can't go outside because that is in the best interest of the community, and people do that, then certainly, regardless of their age, there needs to be consequences. And there are. They were handcuffed and they were fined, right? That's just the way it is. It's not like no one knew these were the rules. They are not going to be the rules forever. They will go. We will go back to normal, or some form of normality, probably next year sometime. But it will happen. But at the moment, in order for us to be safe, and for people, there's a 33-year-old woman died yesterday as a result of COVID-19 in Sydney. And there's been 60-odd deaths since their current outbreak. And that could exponentially increase over time if young jerks who don't give us stuff go out like this. And I think it's appropriate that the police take action.
To us, a bunch of teenagers being handcuffed in the middle of the night and fined $1,000 each for the crime of meeting at a Sydney beach.
To us? To who? To you? Well, not to me. And not to many other people out there who just see them as stupid young people. So, young people going out, driving like lunatics in their car, doing wheelies, screeching around the street, scaring people, perhaps even running people over. That's all okay as well because they're young people. You're an idiot.
Has become normal, But the rest of the world is looking at that footage, looking at that news coverage with abject horror.
It's getting harder and harder to hide if you're doing the wrong thing, especially in the construction industry. A crackdown following on from the recent shutdown. Workers sent home if their paperwork isn't in check.
I don't understand what this particular clip's got to do with the rest of the world looking on. I'm going to move it forward a little bit till we get to, because I don't understand any of that. So we'll get to this Tucker Carlson clip. So sometimes, you know, like they're a news network, but they put together the most inconsequential clips. You say one thing and then the clip doesn't relate to that. Don't know what that's all about.
Scandinavia to South America, marvelling at what's happening in Australia. I mentioned top-rating Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson.
And Jerk of the Year.
Here was his latest report on Australia.
Well, here are the numbers. From mid-July until last week, the entire nation of Australia, that's 25 million people, has averaged about 1.5 COVID deaths per day out of 25 million people.
Which I remind you is something we should be celebrating, and we wish to keep it at that particular level. When we compare it with the United States and Florida, which is the same population as Australia, you Tucker, should be really embarrassed.
And that has been enough to justify the end of Australia and totalitarianism. In one recent case, which really does say it all, authorities executed rescue dogs, shot the dogs to death to prevent Australian dog lovers from traveling to adopt the dogs. Leaving your home is no longer allowed.
Now, we don't know whether they were rescue dogs or they were just dogs that were to be adopted. That's just a bit, well, he kind of exaggerates a bit.
So they just killed the dogs. And the population put up with it. They were told they had to. Nightly news in Australia now looks like a science fiction film.
He wasn't done there. There's more, much more.
One Australian news outlet just reported, and we're quoting, a tip to Crime Stoppers has blown the lid on a church service attended by 60 adults and children. The gathering has been described as selfish and arrogant, end quote.
There have been just as many, thousands more cases in the United States where people have had to go out church services, not for just gathering, but for telling their audience that they did not need to get vaccinated. God was going to save them. You think we're crazy? Compared to you guys, you're really in lunar world. You really are.
For going to church. So what else in Australia is now considered, quote, selfish and arrogant? It's not just going to church or leaving.
Well, actually, you're selfish and arrogant. You're in the United States. Glad you're there, buddy, rather than here.
Your apartment or trying to adopt a dog. Watching the sunset is also selfish and arrogant. Watch.
There's a whole bunch of people.
So don't you like the way Rita has got those two stories? She's talked about them in her segment, and then she's carried them on because they have informed Sky News and Tucker Carlson about these segments. Now, Tucker's the guy that suggested that we should follow Trump's advice with regard to injecting ourselves with some strange medication, and is now suggesting that we talk about that people take some parasite, some medication that animals, horses take to get rid of parasites. Completely untested crap. So this is the man that Rita thinks represents the American view of Australians. Well, I tell you what, if Americans could think clearly enough about the type of system under which they would like to be governed, I would suggest that the parliamentary system we have is far better than their corrupt presidential system. Now, ours isn't perfect by any means, but it is certainly the best of democracy, not the presidential system that they have. So I'm over Rita making out she's Alan Jones, looking, terribly despondent when she talks about what we're doing here in Australia, how the rest of the world, who gives a shit how the rest of the world are responding to us? The important thing is that we deal with this pandemic in the way that we are. It's not pleasant. I don't know whether some of these people just want us to open up. Forget it. Let's make out the virus doesn't exist at all. let it just run rampant as they have in Florida in some parts of the US, where thousands of people per day are dying. Thousands. Is that what we want? You know, I don't think so. It's not what I want. I don't want my kids affected. Don't want my wife affected. I don't want to be infected myself because, you know, I'm over the age, whatever that is. So just some things to keep in mind. If you want to, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you've got any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future, please let me know. Be happy to do that. In the meantime, look after yourself and be safe.